LP10 electronic, LP10 electronic, adjusting the trigger and operating travel. Remove this 2mm Allen screw. The trigger system is removed. Taking the grip, join the plug connector to its corresponding part in the trigger system in order to be able to operate the trigger. For the purposes of this film, we will use a module that has been fully removed from the grip. The pistol must naturally be switched on in order for the trigger to function as designed. Holding the trigger as shown, with this 1.3mm Allen key, you can adjust the operating travel of the trigger. Through operating the trigger, its function is checked. Through slowly turning this screw in a clockwise direction, and whilst doing so, constantly operating the trigger, the point where the trigger no longer functions can be found. Through slowly turning this screw backwards, the neutral position is found. After this neutral position, make a further 1/8 of a turn backwards, that is 1/2 of 1/4 of a turn anti-clockwise. The position is now ideal. On the trigger here is a countersunk metal disc, against which this screw must be precisely positioned when the trigger system is reinstalled. The trigger is reinserted back into its housing and can be pushed forward and then squeezed upwards. In this position the screw can be reinserted, but before doing so, apply Loctite 243 sealant to the thread of the screw. Turn in the screw until you feel the first resistance. With a torque handle driver set to 20 cm, tighten the screw the final amount. 20 cm corresponds to the light pressure from 2 fingers. With the trigger installed, rejoin the grip, making sure that the plug connection is made, and switch on the weapon. This screw here in the front is used to adjust the length of the first stage travel. By screwing in, that is, turning the screw clockwise, the travel is reduced, and by screwing out, in an anti-clockwise direction, the travel is lengthened. This screw behind the trigger is for the trigger pull force. By screwing in a clockwise direction, this increases the weight, and by screwing in an anti-clockwise direction, the weight is reduced. This red sealed screw is an assembly screw and has no influence upon the trigger adjustment. Do not alter this screw. This screw here in the rear is, however, for the trigger point weight. By screwing in a clockwise direction, this increases the trigger point weight, and in the opposite direction reduces it. It is important that there is a minimum of 50 gram weight difference between the trigger pull force and the trigger point weight in order for the trigger to function as designed. When the screw is unscrewed too far, meaning that the difference of 50 grams has not been reached, the trigger no longer functions. Through slowly turning in the pressure point screw, the function is once again achieved. When the trigger pull force is correctly set to the desired force, the trigger point weight is then adjusted. Through turning in the screw in a clockwise direction, the weight increases. Next, it is necessary to check that it conforms with the rules. Once again, when the trigger point screw is unscrewed too far, it no longer functions. On the other hand, screwing in the screw too far is no problem.